Yeah, so we are super delighted to be able to have you tackle on this session today. I don't know anybody who has so much experience in working in this space as you have. So we are delighted that you could make the time. I know it's been a super busy week last week getting ready, and also this weekend. You were on sessions yesterday, you were on session all last week, and today too. And we have been looking very much forward to welcome you here. And I know colleagues from all over the world has also been looking very much forward to meeting you. Those that haven't, this is a fantastic first chance. And those that have definitely have also looked forward to that. Without further delay, I just want to make sure that I also say thank you to all the colleagues on the call. Since we met, and those that are not colleagues or ex-colleagues, since we met, we have basically been expanding the negotiate team with the addition of myself, and you see the rest of the team here on the screen together with me. Michael Köhler, the owner, with the blue and the green, and Manuel Alvarado, who also has joined us, who is our LATAM and US lead. And then Irini, can you maybe pronounce your last name? Because I have so much difficulty to do that.
It's Xanthopoulou.
Thank you, my dear. She is the newest addition also, and we are so happy to have everybody here today. And then, of course, Mr. Terkel Andersen, most of all you. So I will now give the word to you so you can, give an introduction of yourself and your fabulous organization.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to try to present a little bit about rare diseases from a patient perspective, and more precisely the perspective of EURORDIS, Rare Diseases Europe. I guess most of you present here are actually quite familiar with EURORDIS, so I'll go rather quickly over the slides presenting our organization, but still I think it's somehow essential to know what the features of EURORDIS are and how it perhaps distinguishes itself from a number of other patient organizations. As you said, I'm president of EURORDIS since 2003, and my background for joining EURORDIS back in 1997, when it was initiated, was that I actually been working on rare diseases, both on a volunteer and professional capacity for quite a few years. Actually, back in '83, I was asked, due to the fact that I was on the board of the Danish Hemophilia Society, to start working with colleagues from the other Nordic countries to investigate what kind of challenges were there for people living with rare diseases in the Nordic countries, trying to map organizations, relevant diseases, resources available, experts, etc., and what kind of needs were unmet, which were actually everything at that time for people living with a rare disease. So that was the starting point for me personally, and at the end of the '80s, I developed the idea of creating a Danish information and coordination center, providing support for families with rare diseases in order to make them, well, better equipped to meet the social and healthcare systems, but also to inform people working in those systems on the different diseases and conditions and what kind of special needs they would have. And this center was embedded into the Ministry of Social Affairs. I was working there until 2001, and I switched jobs for another position in the social field. But that background actually led me to join EURORDIS already at the board in '97, and then to be asked to become the president in 2003. So that position is actually an unpaid position, a voluntary job, which I have assumed besides my professional obligations, and now I'm entirely dedicated to that on a volunteer basis. EURORDIS has grown enormously since 1997, and we have expanded the different things we are doing also enormously since then. One of the things which have been added onto our portfolio was the Rare Disease Day, which started back in 2008. And yesterday we could actually celebrate the 14th edition of this International Day. Initially, it was, of course, only celebrated in Europe, but it has become extremely popular. And yesterday, I know that it has been celebrated in at least 103 countries from all over the world, from all continents. And we have registered on the website of Rare Disease Day more than 500 events, almost all this year, of course, virtual, with the exception perhaps of all the monuments, iconic monuments, which have been lit in the colors of the Rare Disease Day, the ones you see on the logo. This phenomenon of lighting the buildings has come all the way from Australia to Vancouver, going by Empire State Building in the US. So it's really something which perhaps flags rare diseases and brings to the knowledge of people that there is something called rare diseases, which may be to many people still perhaps a rather vague concept, but increasingly people are getting familiar with a number of these conditions and seeing the special challenges that people live with when suffering from a rare disease. So last week was busy, as Camilla said. We had a number of events, most of those organized by EURORDIS in Brussels, which were supposed to take place in Brussels, but of course all virtual. One of these events was the end of the Foresight study, which is a study commissioned by the European Commission, and where EURORDIS has been the lead, or selected as the lead, and partnering with a number of different institutions and consultancies. The aim of that study has been to put forward a number of recommendations, which we hope will be integrated into a new policy framework in Europe, probably to be adopted within 2 years under the French and Swedish presidency, which will take place together with the Czech Republic in 2022-23. So we look forward to actually seeing these recommendations translated into a new policy framework that will enable us to also call on member states in Europe to get engaged in moving forward on the rare disease agenda. Next slide. A few words on EURORDIS. I know most of you are quite familiar with EURORDIS, but now we are approaching 1,000 members. In fact, I think we are very close to 1,000 as of today. And we are present in all European member states of the EU. Among our members, we also see the national alliances of rare diseases, which come together in a special part of our organization, meeting at least twice, perhaps 3 times a year. We also have these disease-specific federations, which are also important in discussing ways to advance research and drug development for the different diseases. We have an outreach which is much more than the 900 member organizations, each of them covering a number of rare diseases. So we have an outreach to more than 2,500 different diseases, which makes us pretty familiar with the diversity of rare diseases, which cover all kinds of symptoms and organ systems. Next slide. Our perspective is the one of patients, and so our organization is advocating for patients, but certainly with the aim to engage patients in advocacy initiatives. And in order to do that, we do our utmost to qualify patient engagement through a number of schools, the summer school that some of you may have heard of, also with the aim to make sure that patients representing the patient community have all the elements of, for instance, drug development when being selected for a position, for instance, with the European Medicine Agency. Next slide. And that is one of the things that we have actually been able to achieve, actually being able to have patients being the voice of the rare disease community at different levels, and doing that in a way which I believe has really been acknowledged as bringing value to the processes of developing new medicines, for instance. We are represented on EMA. We are represented in different committees relevant for rare diseases and for advanced therapies, and also on the pediatric committee, which is extremely important in order to make sure that as many therapies as possible will also be made available for the pediatric segment. The effort to actually create a voice goes with a number of different initiatives, one of them being our barometer, the Rare Barometer project, where we have now almost 15,000 patients from all over Europe represented, who are willing to constitute a kind of panel for rare diseases and to give their opinion on a number of issues. For instance, on the sharing of data, a topic that I know that we'll come back to. And another of our initiatives is the Rare Connect initiative, which has now been moved to a collaboration with a Canadian university hospital. And Rare Connect was created also with the purpose to link patients with different diseases together in order to make sure that they could, in that close community, exchange experiences and knowledge on rare diseases. And one of the things that I learned pretty early was that patients actually hold a knowledge on the natural history of their own disease, which is not really described very well in literature. So, for instance, when the first drugs or potential drugs being presented for applications for orphan drug status in Europe, patients could actually bring a lot of knowledge. Patient representatives could bring a lot of knowledge onto the discussions, and also point to experts working in the field or having experience with these rare diseases, which would otherwise not have been integrated into the work and the process of really handling those kind of applications. So rare disease patients are, like it or not, experts not only by experience but also by the way they can actually bring a special perspective and special knowledge onto the fore. The Open Academy is a way both to enlighten people who have an interest in becoming advocates for rare diseases as patients on the different elements of research and therapy development, but it is also an attempt to identify people who have the capacity, the qualifications needed to be good advocates also more professional contexts like the EMA committees. We have now more and more also a role as communicating knowledge on rare diseases, and for that reason we have been also chosen by the European Commission to organize the biannual conferences on rare diseases in Europe, the ECRD, which this year as a virtual conference, last year, I'm sorry, the virtual conference gathered 1,500 people from around the world and presented knowledge on rare diseases and ways to advance research and therapy development and social issues, and to make sure that people actually have an opportunity across borders to congregate the knowledge they have on rare diseases. And this is a very important event for us, where we really bring together stakeholders from all parts of health sector, research, etc., and not least the patient communities themselves. So being a knowledge broker is one of the things that we identify ourselves by, and we think that we usually do pretty well in making sure that people realize the benefits of approaching patients, whatever their perspective is, as researchers or as pharma companies or academia, or even as regulators. And there is an increasing understanding of this. Next slide. I'd like to show you this slide because it shows the enormity of the task ahead of us, whatever our stake is in this. As you can see, many rare diseases are very, very rare, really ultra rare diseases. That's a blue column on the left. Whereas you can count about 390 rare diseases, which really represent almost 98% of all patients with rare diseases. This study made by Orphanet, an institution which is a little bit older than EURORDIS, but also based in Paris originally. This study is perhaps the most refined study of how you can actually see the landscape of rare diseases, and how actually it's realistic, I guess, to see treatments being developed for the 98% of patients suffering from the more common rare diseases, whereas we do have an enormous challenge developing rare diseases for therapies for the rare diseases, which are really ultra rare. So we can come back to that, I hope, in the discussion. Next slide. We got involved with the EMA, and that was one of the first really important milestones for EURORDIS. We had set out in '97 with the aim to create something similar to the US orphan drugs regulations, which at that point had already been in existence for 16 years, I believe. So we were really behind in Europe, so there was some catching up to do. We have come quite a far way with the number of designations achieved, 2,394 as of January, I believe. So a number of drugs have reached the market with market authorizations with significant benefit to very many EU patients and also abroad. So so it's really an amazing achievement, and something where I think that the regulation has proven to be an important incentive to the pharma companies, to academia and pharma companies to get involved with this challenge. We saw other nice progress with the regulation on medical products for pediatric use, and with the Advanced Therapy Committee, which was created back in 2007. Next slide. And we have had a lot of follow-up on the European policy field since then, among which, for instance, a recommendation by the European health ministers back in 2009, which paved the way for national strategies to be developed in each and every member state, followed up by the Cross-Border Health Directive back in 2011, where a number of paragraphs actually referred to the need for cooperation and support from member states also for European collaboration, creating also in 2017 the European reference networks, which had a long pregnancy, you might say, but which today counts 24 reference networks for different rare diseases and also some more common diseases, but where you actually can see experts from all over Europe coming together and building a knowledge base on rare diseases, which is unparalleled. And now in 2019, a new addition has come on in the field of research with the joint program on rare diseases, which has a very significant funding, more than 100 million euros for the period of its existence, and which really will give a significant impulse to the collective rare disease research in Europe. Next slide. So the rare disease landscape has developed enormously over the last 25 years, and this is just a selection of the different projects, with some pretty old ones like Orphanet, based in INSERM, the French INSERM, and I've mentioned most of the other ones, but with the aim actually to create a European infrastructure on rare diseases, which will give really a good basis for further progress. Next slide. So we want to design an ecosystem, or that's been our aim, where patient engagement is seen across the board, both when it comes to promoting diagnosis. One of the issues that is really at our heart in ECS is to promote newborn screening, where we see enormous differences in the ability of different member states in Europe to perform genetic screening. Some countries like Germany having the possibility to perform diagnosis on very, very many rare diseases, more than 2,000, and others like Romania only having access to do that in a very little number of diseases. And screening as such is only done in to a large extent in very few countries, but we hope to push that, because we can see the benefit even in those diseases where there may not be actually a therapy available. Next slide. I'd like to come back a little bit to the Open Academy, because the Open Academy is also a way to stimulate organizations in our field, to the member organizations of Europe, our EURORDIS, to see the benefit of also initiating and being comfortable initiating a dialogue with other stakeholders like regulators and academia and pharma. And we believe that this is only possible once you have understood the different elements of research and and pharma therapy development, how clinical research is actually done, how clinical trials are performed, and what kind of elements are involved in the regulatory process. So we hope by that we can actually incentivize organizations also to find the courage to establish, for instance, community advisory boards. We'll come back to that. Next slide. One of the big challenges that we face now is that we may have products for a number of diseases, certainly not enough to meet the needs. But we do have a number of products, but we do also see that the take-up of these products in different member states in Europe does differ significantly. So we see that access for patients to drugs which have actually achieved a market authorization is one of the major problems that we're facing. And the delays are significant, up to years. So we need really to find ways to speed up that process, both before actually reaching market authorization, but also in the research, but also in ensuring that there will be an early dialogue with decision makers so that we can limit the time used on the HTA process. So it would be optimal if we could actually, as it was also already foreseen in the Cross-Border Healthcare Directive that I mentioned from 2011, it would be optimal if we could have cooperation between member states in Europe to ensure that we can speed up the health technology assessment and have a dialogue on what would form the basis for fair pricing of products in the European community. One of the elements that could perhaps be taken into that is the continuum of evidence generation that will be done in the future, we believe, on products which have been taken onto the market and which could then also form the basis for further establishing the level of fair pricing for products based on the evidence generation from the clinical practice. All that will be much easier due to the European reference networks, which work together to also create the possibility to accumulate data from different studies and from the clinical practice, and to really see the changes achieved for the individual patients based on more thorough knowledge of the natural history and the diversity of the phenotypes of patients with a specific disease. So we believe that there is a strong connection between both the clinical practice and the exchange taking place inside the European reference networks, and the fact that we can, by that, also achieve a situation where data generation will be much more feasible. Next slide. So this is a spiral which would take us from the bottom, where we hope for a new research model where we could simplify the clinical trials models and be sure that we only focus on patient-relevant outcome measures, where we go to an evaluation process with the involvement of also HTA bodies and payers, and to a delivery model with clinical data collection inside the EINs and post-marketing data collection, and where we could end up hopefully also to have a common understanding of how we could reach a price for the individual drug, which would make it available both in different healthcare systems with different abilities, but also make the whole system more sustainable for the health economies. Next slide. We believe that patient engagement in the very early phases, from really identifying research priorities and to identifying the different patient-relevant outcomes, could be one of the very useful tools to shorten the way from idea to actually having a product. And we have now a number of different elements which enable us to initiate that kind of dialogue and to perform it in settings where we can build trust and confidentiality, and at the same time having the highest level of transparency and sharing of concerns that is possible in this, of course, very competitive environment. So that's why EURORDIS has developed the EuroGap program with the intention to have patient organizations operate communities where pharma companies can be invited to present their different ideas and have them tested by patients who have a thorough knowledge of the needs of their individual disease. I know many of you are familiar with the Paradigm study, so I won't go much into detail here. We can come back to it if needed. Another of the toolboxes that we have is the EUPANIC program, which looks a bit like the Open Academy of EURORDIS, but actually trying to make sure that patients who want to get involved in this sort of dialogue and collaboration could actually get a good idea of the different elements that they need to know about in order to be trusted partners also for academia and industry in that kind of discussions. Next slide. We so far have quite a number of good experience with the EuroGap program. We have been involved with 19 different companies, and I know that more products have actually been tested. I think it says 32 protocols, no, 36 products have actually been in some way influenced by the dialogues taking place in these patient communities. But it is a difficult exercise, and it's not been easy to create continuity, especially in the time of COVID-19. Things have to change. We probably have to redesign our concept for the purpose of a virtual getting together on it, which is not so easy, but I hope we can design a sustainable model for continuing the EuroGap program also in these challenging times. So I think that's almost the end of my slides. Next one. Yes, some questions were raised during or in anticipation of this session. The biggest challenge for rare diseases today overall, well, there are a number. I think one of the biggest is how we actually get to the point where we can say that there will be good progress in developing therapies for the rarest, the ultra rare diseases. How will we actually be able to transform some of the progress that is being made in gene editing, for instance, in a way that can create safe therapies for the very rare diseases. That's one. Another one is the challenge around getting access to the therapies developed and creating an environment for making products available for patients where all stakeholders actually feel that this is a sustainable environment, something which will not really pose a hard to defend frame for the healthcare budgets in individual countries. So that is one of the big challenges. There are many others. When it comes to how pharma is doing on engaging patients, I see substantial progress, and I see an environment which invites pharma to really consider this and doing it in a way which makes sense to both parties. And I see different regulatory bodies also really pushing for this. Camilla actually pointed my attention towards some new guidelines which have been issued by FDA recently, and which also really makes it essential for companies in the future to engage in that kind of dialogue and to take that seriously. So I think pharma is really increasing its understanding of the reasons behind this and why this is seen also as extremely productive also by regulatory bodies. Then there is a very interesting question about how we make sure that the natural history data are made available, and not only in our setting our different healthcare system collaborations as within the EU, but also as internationally. And I think EURORDIS is one of the ways, the creation of EURORDIS, the international research collaboration, is one of the ways that we can come to that point. But of course, there are a number of difficulties associated with this. One being, of course, data protection and the differences in data protection laws in different countries across also the Atlantic. So this is not an easy one to solve, but I think we are slowly moving in the direction where everybody realizes the potential and need. But it is something which takes some reflection also in the coming years. But there is a lot going on in that field.
Thank you so much, Terkel. I want to thank you so much for a really, really brilliant presentation. We have 1 minute left, so if somebody at the meeting have a question, final question for Mr. Andersen, you are free to pose it.
And we can go beyond the time if anyone wants to.
It's Lasse here, Terkel. So I don't have much of a question. I just want to say thank you for a very thorough and really, really nice presentation. And I mean, you touch upon so many of the things I said, at least for my sake. I wanted to ask you about around your involvement with EURORDIS, around the future, how you see it for EURORDIS. Maybe also, I mean, you touch upon it beyond, you could say, the European focus collaboration, but maybe a few words on the global setting and global partners and where you see that going for EURORDIS. That could be interesting to hear.
Well, we are very proud that we took the initiative some years ago to form the Rare Diseases International. And Rare Diseases International is an organization which is growing steadily and which has already reached kind of international recognition by the very fact that it is now also closely associated with and partnering in the development of a special committee inside the UN system. Rare Diseases International has also already proven its worth by being able to initiate a dialogue with the World Health Organization. And the World Health Organization is at this point ready to step into a kind of more formal dialogue with Rare Diseases International on a number of topics, to have rare diseases integrated into a number of programs, and to also canvas for national health policies to pay attention to rare diseases in for instance, screening programs. One of the discussions we are having at this point with the World Health Organization is how actually to modify the criteria for newborn screening in order to make sure that newborn screening is also expanded to diseases where therapy at this point is not available. And I believe that is of incredible importance, because otherwise we will not be able to constitute the kind of cohorts available for clinical trials in the future. So also with the aim of research and drug development, I find it of extreme importance that we use the progress that we have in the genome sequencing and possibility of newborn screening to make available the possibility to create a much better basis for data collection on patients, even if unfortunately we do not have much to offer in terms of therapy. And besides that, we know that it is of significant benefit to patients to be aware of their disease, to know about their disease, to get together to exchange information and experiences, and to create the kind of communities that in the end will enable, hopefully, to foster research and therapy development.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time, Tackle, and for even giving us more minutes that we agreed to. We are super grateful about this. Is there any other comments before we close the meeting? As I mentioned initially, we have recorded this. It will be available so everybody can share with their colleagues.
Only that I'm enthusiastic that there is this interest from pharma, and that there is an understanding of how it's important and why it's important to respect the different roles that we actually take in advancing this agenda. I think it's not always been understood from the side of pharma, and apologies for being very direct here, but it's not always been understood that some kind of both respecting the difference and the autonomy of rare disease groups, as well as collaborating on equal terms, is essential. It's difficult to maintain the different balances and to not be overcautious at the same time, but to understand that patient organizations actually, through their advocacy, do pave the way for important progress, while at the same time providing important information to companies about how actually to, for instance, design their studies in the most convenient ways. It's something where we can really do things together and do it well, without getting to a point where anybody could, and especially regulatory authorities, could suspect that there would be a conflict of interest. So playing by that, I think we can really achieve a lot of good things together.
What a beautiful roundup. I'm not going to say any more, but thank you so much, Terkel. Thank you for joining us, and thanks everybody joining from everywhere across the pond in Europe. And thank you so much. Take care, stay safe. We'll be in touch.
All of you. Thank you.
Thank you.